Hi, everyone. Good morning to good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are in the world today. We're super excited to have you all on today's How to Craft a Killer Resume. Funny story, when I was crafting something for yesterday when I was getting ready for today, I was typing how to craft a kick-ass resume, and then I was like, that may not be right. So like, it's killer resume. That sounds better. Anyway, we're really excited to kick off today's call. I'm going to introduce a couple of folks here. We have Julian Pritchard from Bates White, who is going to be joining us today to tell us a little bit about him and what Bates White has going on and all the candidates that they're looking for. And then also we're going to kick over to Jenny Ray and we're going to learn all about resumes. So Julian, why don't we start with you?
Great. Thank you, Eden. Appreciate the introduction. So like Eden said, my name is Julian Pritchard. I'm the recruiter and lead sourcer here at Bates White. So just a little bit of information on Bates White. So we're an economic consulting firm located in Washington, D.C., founded in 1999. So everyone's very excited about our 25th anniversary coming up this year. We have a lot of events planned, things like that. Very excited. So for anyone who might not be familiar with economic consulting, I can provide a quick overview. So our clients here at Bates White are typically law firms, Fortune 500 companies, government agencies that are all involved in some sort of litigation. So these folks hire us to offer economic analysis, expert testimony, things like that. So for example, the Department of Justice might hire us to help evaluate a merger between two companies and the effects of that merger. We also might work on cases when one company is suing another for some sort of anti-competitive behavior. They'll hire us to calculate the damages of that behavior. For a quick example, this is an example I like to use with candidates I'm talking to on the phone. We recently worked on a case between Google and Epic Games. I think this is a fairly popular case. You may have read about it in other places, but you can also read about it on our website. We worked on the Epic Games side. Epic Games is a popular video game company. They make Fortnite. Maybe some of you have played. They sued Google for anti-competitive practices, and they eventually won their case with the help of Bates White. We actually had an expert that testified for Epic Games on our findings and our eventual report. So very exciting, very cool work you can do here. So a little bit more on the work. Our consultants work on processing and analyzing large data sets, creating visuals, developing economic models, conducting industry research, all of these different things. A little bit different than other types of consulting work. So our work is very heavy on the quantitative side. So if you enjoy things like programming, coding, analyzing data, I think this is a great job for you. Our roles also don't require travel like many other types of consulting. So a big plus there. Our firm is growing. We are looking for experienced consultants. So let me share my screen briefly for you. Oh, it looks like I'll need permission here. Eden, if you could go ahead and give me that.
That might
Oh
be
yeah,
fine
Jenny
as
Ray, do you
well.
mind?
Oh yeah, all good.
Hold on a
Sure,
second
sure.
though.
I can give a little more context.
Okay, try now.
Sure. Let me. All right. Can y'all see that slide there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Cool. So our firm is growing. We are actively hiring for experienced consultants this summer, looking for folks with around 2 to 5 years of experience. Now, with this experienced consultant program, you can join the firm as a consultant two or a senior consultant. So not looking for folks out of undergrad, but looking for that specific set of experience there. C2s, senior consultants, that's what we're looking for. You can also find a link to our website. I believe JPEth shared that in the chat, but it's also right here on this slide. And then I am happy to answer any questions you have about the nature of this process, what we're looking for, any questions you may have on the recruiting process here at Bates White for this experienced consultant program, and honestly, anything else anything else you can think of. Cool. So again, if all of this sounds appealing, I would encourage you to apply. You can go right to our website and see that application. We do require a resume, a cover letter, and a transcript. Also, quick management consultant plug. We recently published a podcast, and I believe we have other videos with management consultant on their YouTube. Great conversation with the management consultant team and one of our partners, Scott Weishare. He's actually the managing partner now. Great information about our firm and economic consulting in general. There's a conversation with managing consultant Amelia Irvin, and then as well as at principal level, Katie Luker, who does a great job explaining a case that she recently worked on. So would highly encourage you, if you're looking for more information on Bates White, to listen to those management consulting content. I believe it's on their YouTube page as well as their website. Cool. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That is it for me, and I hope to see some of the names on the call applying in the near future.
Julian, I actually have a few questions for you if you can take a couple questions for me.
Sure.
Do y'all hire international students or candidates?
It depends on so yes, we do. It depends on work authorization, I think, like a lot of things. But there are certain positions that we do. Experienced consultant is not usually one of them, though.
Okay, great to know. Thank you so much. And outside of experienced consultant, do you have any internship opportunities or entry-level opportunities that our folks can be pointed towards? We have some that are also in their undergrad programs and just starting out their careers.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I focus a lot on this experienced consultant program, Eden, but we also have an entire SCP program or summer consultant program. We like to call them summer consultants, but it's essentially our internship program for folks that are rising seniors. So that recruiting should be coming up in August. So if you're a current junior, rising senior, interested in economic consulting, would highly encourage you to apply. It was actually the Vault ranked #1 internship program for consulting. So lots of fun things you can look forward to there. And then we also have a typical undergrad recruiting process as well.
Awesome. Very cool. Jeannie Ray, do you have anything you want to add here?
No, I just want to say from our perspective, Bates White is an awesome firm, y'all. You should engage with them. I've done a couple of the conversations with them, and I feel like Julian, at some point, can we just agree to not call it economic consulting? Like, I think it's confusing when we explain what it is, because I think a lot of people are like, I don't even know what that is. But we've done a big deep dive on what it actually is, what you actually do. You build incredible analytical skills, solve big problems for organizations. And like the thing that has been a common theme across the org every time I talk to somebody from Bates White is that they feel like they are very intellectually stimulated, like they're never bored. And so just as a plug from coming from the inside now to the outside, if y'all are looking at economic consulting and don't think it sounds exciting because you didn't love that one economics class in college, that's fine. You're going to do a lot of really interesting work for really interesting companies, and I'd encourage you to just take a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jenny Ray. Yeah, especially for maybe the folks earlier in their careers. We have info sessions, and I would be remiss if I didn't kind of echo what they say in these other info sessions that we've done, where, we have folks that aren't like economic experts or didn't even have or graduate with economics degrees. But one of the things we pride ourselves on is if you have the aptitude for those quantitative skills and the qualitative skills that we're looking for, the internal development that's done at Bates White is something we pride ourselves on. And so you'll be able to learn how to do the quantitative, how to do the qualitative side, and be able to move up, because we love that development side. And a lot of these development opportunities are run by current consultants. So it's not just management that cares about these things, it's your peers as well that will put on things like Stata training, R training, Excel training, as well as things that will develop soft skills, leadership, mentorship, things like that.
Stunning. Okay. Thank you so much. Well, Julian, thanks for coming on. If you're able to stay, I know there's some other messages in the chat. You're welcome to feel free to respond to them or point people to specific situations. So as Julian mentioned, he's really specifically focused on the experienced consultant route, but Bates White is a great firm at many levels. So if not Julian, then there will be somebody else inside the org that hopefully you can point folks to. We know that you came to talk about resumes. So Eden, is there anything else that you want to share before I pop that presentation back up?
No, we're just really excited to dive in. Thanks, Julian. We love you guys, and we so appreciate your time. Oh, that is my email. Looks like there we go.
Yeah, there we go. How's that?
It's perfect.
I usually try to just share my banking codes for 1 second on the video so everybody gets a chance to like come back and find that minute. It's like a Taylor Swift Easter egging thing, you know. So we're so glad that y'all are here. If you could just in the chat bar type for us where you're calling from and your favorite snack. I'm headed into summer. I have 3 children that I'll have to feed 3 meals a day to. It takes me about a week to be like, how in the world do these children eat like $7,000 worth of food a day? But I'm looking for great snacks to stock my pantry. So I always love our international community that comes onto these calls. It's a thrill to have you here. As we dive into the material today, I wanted to put this up. We'll pop it back up at the end, but there are 2 main ways that people choose to work with us out of the topic that you came for today. One is and both of these are, by the way, for individuals. If you're here for career services or for anyone else, and I'm going to pop a poll up as I'm talking through this. Let me do that at the same time so that we've got plenty of time here. Here's the code for the poll. So I'm curious just who's on the call. P is for pre-MBA, M is for MBA or like kind of hiring in at that level. E is for experienced hire. You're not in an academic program. C is for career services, and F is for like working on a consulting firm on staff. So some of you we know are not here because you're recruiting or helping people recruit, but others are. So it'd be just great to know what the breakdown of this audience is. That'll help me understand the questions that you're going to pop into the chat. Eden is going to moderate the questions in the chat today. So if y'all have questions, ask them. Caleb will also get a little spicy in the chat. So if you have a Caleb specific question when we introduce him in just a hot second, then I want to make sure that, that you guys get your questions answered, because we probably will not have a chance for open live Q&A today. There's just too much good material that we're going to cover, but we do want you to get your questions answered throughout the session. And so I'll let you finish that poll just for about 30 more seconds. But the way that most folks will engage with us out of this call is that you will say, my resume does not tell the story that I want it to tell. Like, I think I'm cool. My resume isn't cool. I think that I am really analytically insightful. I think that I have great business experience, but I don't feel like my resume says that. We help you tell your story by touching everything on your resume. So we help you with the structure. We help you with the balance of what should go where. We do not fabricate anything, as you do not also. So it's not a retelling of a story that is not yours, but sometimes people have that sense when they get a resume back, like, I didn't know I was this amazing. And the way that we're able to retell what you do is pretty remarkable. We do this for over 1,000 people a year, which actually, if you break it down on a per day basis, isn't a lot. We give you a ton of attention. We are obsessive about your story. And that's usually one of the first ways that people engage with us. A lot of people jump straight into Black Belt, which also includes a resume edit. Black Belt is our most popular package, which is 8 hours of coaching. It also includes a 1-year membership to the management consultant community. So Caleb Preston, who's here, is going to say a quick hey from the community and to the community, because I know we've got Caleb, some community members here as well. And so Caleb's just going to tell you a little bit about the community. And if you've got questions that are community related, job search related, Caleb leads our career advising team. So Caleb, if you just want to share a little bit about that, that'd be awesome.
You bet. Thank you so much, everyone, for being on today. And yes, I'm the community manager here, management consultant. So I get the pleasure of getting to build relationships with many of you that are on this call that are already in our community or in our Black Belt program, and those of you that will be soon. Our community is an incredible place that really is here to turbocharge your network and your career by really bringing people into your life, whether it's other peers that you can practice cases with, or coaches that have worked at McKinsey, Bain, or BCG that can help guide you along the way, or folks like myself, the MC team, that can really support you in finding the right job that fits your career goals and aspirations and your background. We really have a whole ecosystem that surrounds you. So inside the community, you get access to all of our digital resources, a whole support structure, and it's like having the network of another like MBA program without actually being in that school. We have a global network of people that are new friends and consultant peers in the future. So if you have questions that are community specific or even more of the Black Belt program, feel free to reach out to me in the chat, and we'll do the best I can to answer those. Thank you.
Thanks, Caleb, for joining us. We're glad that you're here. Also, if you want to meet with Eden, you can both read about the programs themselves or schedule time to meet with Eden if you want to scan the QR code. So that will take you to a bunch of happy places. Eden, if you also want to just pop some links into the chat that people can follow, that would be awesome. So as we mentioned today, it's all about crafting a killer resume. And I just love this. This never gets old for me. The first thing I ever did for Management Consulted before I was the managing director was edit people's resumes. And before that, I reviewed hundreds of resumes a season when I was at Bain. And it's a different skill. Reviewing resumes and deciding this one's good and this one's bad is really different than taking a resume from okay to killer, or as we say in the deck today, from killed to killer. And so our focus is on really making this a fun experience for you today, where you can hopefully get an insight about your story that you're not including, or maybe you're crowding your story and you need to repackage it. So I love getting into people's stories. I think that y'all are just the most remarkable people on the planet. We are so inspired by you. It is so interesting to hear about the different kinds of work that you've done. And at the same time, you make a lot of freaking mistakes that are unforced errors, and we want to help you solve for that today. So our agenda is to talk through, first of all, the resume process, just like what happens in this black box when you pop a resume into an application process. What are the three parts of a killer resume? What should the resume actually look and feel like? And then kind of some of the thought processes that we go through in taking your resume from what we call killed, which is in the dead pile, or as you'll hear later, we called it the abyss at Bain, to the killer pile, which is, I know for many of you, your real goal for today. The first thing that I want to say, our team put together this awesome slide for upcoming MBB deadlines. We know that you are not only applying to MBB firms, but these are the leaders in the deadline space. So these will be the earliest ones. And generally, they are the ones that everybody else waits for before they set their deadline. So all of a sudden, we have massive deadline, kind of input coming in, and we keep a page on our site dedicated to deadlines. So Eden, Caleb, I know you're going to pop that into the chat, but the deadlines page remains active. You should bookmark it. It's a great place to come back to. When they are announced, we send them out on social and also on email, but we don't send constant reminders out that's like tomorrow is a deadline, next Tuesday is a deadline, because that would just be a lot. So we ask that we'll tell you when they're coming, but we can't tell you when they're here. So we really need y'all to pay attention to that. But in this call today, we can remind you for Bain, advanced professional degrees. So those of you who are, either experienced hires or doing, work as a PhD or an MD, et cetera, June 26th, 2024. And then associate consultant or summer AC is July 7th and September 8th. We get a question a lot. If there's two application deadlines, should I apply for the first one? The answer is unequivocally yes. Like in no circumstances should you wait. It is not strategic to wait. So what you need to do right now is get your booty ready, because 2 weeks after June 26th are going to be the first interviews for Bain. So y'all have like 6-ish weeks, and we've been telling you this, we know, since January, but all of a sudden it's here. I'm very, my team will attest to the fact that I'm very deadline driven. And so if you are too, just pay attention to those deadlines. BCG, they're expected in July for APDs. They have already released their associate and summer associate deadlines, July 17th and September 4th. And McKinsey for APD is June 7th. Okay, June 7th, that's like next week. Right? So just so that you're clear, don't miss that deadline. It sneaks up on a lot of people. And then BA and summer BA is business analyst. So that's for undergrads, is August 8th and then September 12th. So really, basically, you've got to have your resume ready by July 7th if you're going to drop everywhere. And by June 7th, if you are an APD that is interested in applying for McKinsey. If you're not sure whether you qualify, ask those questions in the chat. But these are the deadlines that are coming up, and we wanted you to know about them. So I think it's just really helpful to start with what your resumes 101 are. And I wanted to just ask you in the chat, because I really want to speak not just to the process, but to your specific pain points, to put into the chat, what is one thing you don't like about dropping your resume, whether it's how you make it, how it makes you feel, or a question that you have about an uncertainty that you have about it. I want you to just pop that into the chat. And what I'm going to do is tell a little bit of my background and my story about how I learned about the resume process. And then I'm going to go into some of our content slides that specifically address these things that you don't like about dropping your resume. So just really quickly about my background. I had a resume for everything in undergrad. I had my pre-med resume. I had my resume for summer internships in banking. I had my resume for the types of grants that I applied for. I did 2 summers of research in West Africa on the medical system. I had a resume for everything, and none of my resumes were the same. And I really felt like you had to tell a tailored and specific story. And so when I went to apply for consulting, I did what I would not recommend any of you do, which is that I took a resume and I sent it to a friend in consulting, and I was like, what should I change? Right. And so even though there's a powerful moment there where they became my advisor and helped me, I took a huge risk. If I had a crappy resume, that would have been the end of my life in consulting. I would not be here today sharing with you. And so I'm going to encourage you later to do the work on your own, which is what I should have done in consulting to prep for getting ready to drop a resume. When I actually applied for the process, I thought it was my resume that got me an interview. It wasn't. My resume was the tool that I used to apply with. What got me the interview were my referrals. I'm going to also hopefully illuminate that again for you today. But there is a huge difference between you telling your story alone, solo, into a black void, and someone else telling the highlights of your story that you have clearly articulated in your resume as an advocate on your behalf. And I did not realize that the reason that I got the opportunities that I did wasn't because I had a great resume, because it was actually kind of average when I look back on it, but because somebody said this average resume is somebody that you should talk to. And I just want to encourage all of you, no matter how amazing you are, like unless you are literally an Olympian who's also won a Nobel Peace Prize, who also has like a 200 million person following because you're a best-selling author, like no one is that person, right? Everyone else cannot stand on their merits against all these other phenomenal people. If we just took the time on this call to talk through how incredible everybody is, you would recognize this. What you need is more than the resume. So I didn't get that when I went through the process. When I went into Bain, I was like, oh, this is sweet. Like everybody here really cares about recruiting. And really it was like 1 part cultural, but 1 part self-serving. You're like, I don't want to let a maniac get through the door. I want the best people that I'm going to have to work with and have to train and have to coach to be the people that are coming through. So the firm was very, very deeply invested in recruiting. What that meant was that if somebody wrote and said, could I grab 15 minutes with you? I said, yes. If they asked for a referral explicitly, I would tell them yes or no, I can or can't refer you. And sometimes I would even run it by somebody internally. And in addition, when I was going through the process, when I was actually going through the process I'm about to share with you, where I got a big bank of resumes and we had to score them and then we had to discuss them, I realized all of the things that I had done wrong. So I became really passionate about not just recruiting people into the process who are natural fits, but also helping people who I thought could be a good fit unpackage their crappy story and make it into a story that really resonated with how good they could be on the job, because a lot of this is very much about presentation. So that's a little bit about me. I'm Jenny Ray LaRue. I'm one of the managing directors of Management Consulted, and my background is as a consultant with Bain, a job that I held for about 3 years, and I thought I would leave the consulting industry forever. And lo and behold, here I am with Management Consulted. We're the #1 resource for everything related to consulting jobs on the internet. We have a global influence, over 100 school partners. There's no one who does as much as we do related to consulting. And so 20 years later, y'all, 20 years later is where we are today. I still love it. I love you and I love your stories. And I'm excited to help you today tell those stories. The first thing that you need to know is who's going to actually read your resume, because you have to tell a story for an audience, right? So it has to be for something more than just hey, this is what I think a good resume should look like. The first type of resume will be read by a computer. And we're going to see this more and more. The larger the firm, the more likely you'll have an AI buffer or a screening round for your resume. And the computer screen will be keyword based because AI isn't smart enough yet to say this is a good resume. It's not smart enough to make qualitative decisions. It can make informational decisions, but not qualitative decisions. It will be position specific. It will say, this is the thing that we're looking for. How well does this match and articulate this level? It will grade things like your language skills inside the resume. It will be very data driven. It will look at how much data you utilize and what the proportion of data is. And the follow-up of a computer screen is a screening call to be like, oh, do you speak English, know business, have the ability to have an executive conversation? The second type is a recruiter screen. Big Four firms use significant amounts of recruiter screens. And I don't know if Julian is still on the call. I'm guessing that Julian does a lot of recruiter screens for Bates White. Like when you submit a resume, it doesn't necessarily go to a panel. Julian is like, I am hiring for these positions. I'm going to take the first pass at these. So often there is a gatekeeper, a person who is looking at your resumes, and the recruiter screen does a skills specific review. Are you a right prepared candidate for a specific job? They focus on the impression that they get from you. They do a quick scan and they follow up with a screening call. It's kind of a quick yes or no filter. The ones that fall into the yes pile get the screening call before they pop you into a large range of interviews. The third is a professional review. This is the kind that usually is employed in core recruiting processes. If a firm has a target school or these deadlines that McKinsey and Bain and BCG are publishing, this is what your resume is going to go through. These resumes are qualitative. They are based on your potential for the job. So it's not, hey, you did 2 years of Stata and you held a president position on campus. It's kind of like, do I feel like they're a top performer? Could they thrive here? Are they intellectually curious? This one's from a religious studies background. This one's from a government background. This one's from a finance background. We'll take all of them, right? They are really thinking about not just the individual, but also the cohort that they're bringing in. And so it's a very different lens that they're looking for. And what we did at Bain, which is mirrored by many of the top firms that follow the same process, is that we did an individual numerical ranking. So each person on the team scored every resume. And then based on the conglomerated individual numerical ranking, the averages that you got across the board, we would segment those groups into different people. I'll show you in just a second how that actually works. So there's a review and a discussion session, and then that's followed up with an interview. So you go directly to an interview, not a screening process, because the process to deliberate on your story and your background and whether or not you got a referral happens all before the interview process. So you're not notified by a, let's jump on the phone for 15 minutes, which is industry standard, by the way. Every boutique firm uses that. Firms that are hiring in the off-cycle, firms that are like today, Tuesday in the middle of May, I need people or Wednesday in the middle of May, still feels like Tuesday after the holiday weekend. Wednesday in the middle of May, I still need people for these roles. They'll employ the other types. So knowing which one you're going through is a really helpful part of positioning your resume with the more than the resume piece that you're really going to need here. What happens to your resume? Most resumes are submitted kind of early to midweek. Resumes submitted on like a Wednesday, sometimes even a Sunday night. Human resources will then compile a book of the resumes. This is for the professional resume review explicitly. Then individual scoring will happen. You can think of that as the separated filter in the professional recruiter process. And then HR creates preliminary categories. And these were the 3 preliminary categories that they would come up with at Bain. First was the A-list. The A-list are people who were put on what we called a pro list. They were people that we were watching. We knew that they had competitive interests from other firms. They were at the top of their classes, the president of the class, the star athlete on the basketball team, right? They were the people that we had kind of been tracking. We knew them. Some of the people who were their upperclassmen were friends with them. The pro list are kind of the pre-selected people that you're like, look, we've got to, this is what we would consider to be cream of the crop. We're going to go ahead and interview them. Also, any high-ranking candidates, so people that come out on the top of the numerical ranking list. Pre-selected candidates, often that have gone through diversity channel recruiting. So they've done a pre-work or a pre-interview before the interview process. And then partner networking, and partners at most firms have the ability to basically be like, interview this person full stop. And the answer is, sounds great. When? So the A list for us was under 10% of the total population. It was around 20 people out of a, let's call it 60 to 80 person interview list, right? So 33% of the total interview pool, but a very small portion, 20 people out of maybe 500 that would normally be input for the recruiting process. The second part is the abyss. These are people who, like, some of you do this. You do this to us. I don't even know if you know it, but you write us emails and you write us like 100 in a day. Don't do that, because the firms will be like, this person we cannot release to a senior client because they have no filter. They don't understand the laws of the game. They don't understand how to work in professional business. And so you over network, you over pressure, or you overshare, right, is how you kind of get onto that con list. But it's basically a list that the firms hold. Usually it's honestly written in paper and not typed anywhere. But it's a list of like, we will not ever interview these people. And the low ranking candidates. So around 50% of our total pool, we would just be like, look, there's no reason to look at them. We have plenty of other great candidates. So 50% would go into the abyss. The rest of them, we would dedicate an up to 3-hour period to discussing them. So we would kind of say, look, we're not going to look at the scores now. This entire pool of people, our job is to pull 40 people out of it. So we would take somewhere between 100 and 150 of those people. They would be the medium ranking candidates and their rescues from the abyss. Because we would look through the list of the abyss and some people would be like, oh, that person does have a really crappy GPA, but they're a phenomenal human. Like, we should interview them. Or this person didn't have a summer internship, but I know that they had a family emergency. Like, we should really accommodate for that, right? What you might hear me say in here, but I just want to make explicit, in every single one of these situations, whether you network well or poorly is directly related to whether or not you get an interview. It also explains why some people without networking can still get interviews. Like, if you are a very high ranking candidate, you don't have to talk to somebody. If you're a medium ranking candidate that happens to have something special that's different than many of the other people, which you won't know, but that's our perspective from the reviewers room, then you could also slip through without networking. But the best way to tilt the odds in your favor is to think through this in the way of, okay, great. The first thing that I need is a networking referral. The second thing that I need is a great story. Your resume should be firm agnostic. So you do not build a Bain resume, a McKinsey resume. This was one of my big mistakes. I went to Bain and I was like, hey, what should I do with my resume? And they told me advice. I went to McKinsey and I asked them the same question. They told me different advice. So what I thought was that I needed a McKinsey resume and a Bain resume. I didn't. I needed one great resume. And both of them were saying, you don't have a great resume, but they were proposing different ways to fix it. There are many ways to retell a great story on a resume. And so it will be very confusing for you if you ask for too much early input within the process of each one of these firms. In addition, your resume story really needs to fit the position that you apply for. So your resume story needs to explain your timeline incredibly clearly. As Julian was mentioning, like, don't apply for the job that he posted today and explained about if you are an undergrad. They don't want you. They're not looking for you. And that doesn't mean that Bates White doesn't want you. It means that that job is not the right fit, and you're going to burn some bridges and burn some collateral and just waste your time, right? And it's going to be discouraging. You're going to come back to us crying. You're going to go to Caleb and you're going to be like, Caleb, no one's hiring. And we'll be like, well, what did you apply for? Caleb's like, you guys, like, you have to apply for the right job that fits you. So if you have questions about what the right job is, this is the easiest way that we can think of to break it down. In under 5 years, you are at a pre-MBA level, under 5 years of work experience. And if you are in an undergrad or specialty master's program, if you are in an MBA or you have 5 to 8 years of work experience, that's usually the post-MBA position. That's where you could say, look, I've got 4 years of Power BI under my belt. I have amazing Python coding experience. I love analytics. I did these 3 key projects. Like, I'm ready for this, y'all. Let me at it. A manager is I've managed people and I've worked for 9 to 15 years. A partner is I have really clear expertise in either a function or an industry. And then there are other roles, the internal roles of the organizations that you work with that also they hire for. And so your resume story needs to fit the timeline of the position that you are applying for. Right. For those of you who have over 16 years worth of experience, like you don't want, trust me, you don't want a post MBA role. You will feel weird being with people who have 5 years of work experience on the same team. The firms are set up so that the culture like makes sense. And so you at 20 years out is not going to feel like you're the right kind of contributor for those roles. Our job with you when we edit people's resumes is to help you tell the story that is true. Right? If you are a 20-year experienced hire, we have to tell people how you are an expert based on what you did. And if you can't figure out your expertise, we're going to work on it with you. So these are some of the key pieces that a lot of people have that they don't kind of focus on, and then they tell a very confusing story that's hard for the firms to understand. In addition, your resume should highlight some key skills. These are really the things that your time is broken down to do inside the firm. And so sometimes we read jargon and kind of neutral and very unfocused language in your story. And we're like, did you do research? And you're like, yeah, I read like 600 market research reports from 3 different countries. I'm like, well, put that on the resume, right? Did you do Excel or analytics? You'll say, I analyzed, but you won't tell me in Excel, I analyzed 10,000 lines of data. I created 40 different queries in an Excel macro. Like I built a dynamic dashboard. Like you don't tell me the specifics enough of the analytics that you've done to demonstrate that prowess. PowerPoint, like I presented a 40 slide deck to X, being really explicit about what that looks like. And then also the meetings that you go in and through, the meetings that you've had with people demonstrating that you could be in the room happily with some of these senior folks. So recruiting relationships, and also travel and adventure, right? That you're good at doing things that are outside of work is also important in the long run. Every single person, like they told me this at Bain, I didn't get it until later, honestly, probably until I was doing stuff with Management Consulted, I didn't get it. But they were like, you'll be an okay analyst, but probably average, which ended up totally being true. But they were like, but you would be a phenomenal partner. And we think about that when we hire somebody out of undergrad. That's remarkable longevity and vision, but they'll look for your ability to establish and communicate and build relationships that are trustworthy. They'll also look for your just general interests. In general, people who have a tremendous amount of interests really like and stay with the firm, or they go off and do something where they become a client of the firm, both of which are win-wins. Caleb and Eden, any questions that came up from the first portion of the presentation that you feel like you want to give voice to in the larger presentation before I move on to the 3 parts of a killer resume?
There's one quick one I'll say that I already addressed in the chat, but when and where would you include a summary or highlight at the top of your resume? When is that relevant?
I'll talk about that in just a second. But basically, like, we really don't like it. The overview is a like buffer part. You'll see that I allocated no percentage to the numbers here for it. And in general, what summaries historically were used for was to restate what you should put in your cover letter or statement of interest or a message to somebody who's referring you, which is like, I want this job. Right. So if you're like, I am seeking this kind of job, like you're applying for it, they're kind of assuming that you want it. Or it's a summary because you didn't tell your story clearly enough that I could scan your resume and see it. So it is a fallback to a deficiency in the resume that we would rather solve in another way. And so I would generally recommend that you cut it and give that space to the really tangible, clear impact of what you've done, because I personally skip them. I don't think they're valuable uses of real estate.
That's great.
Good question, though.
Thank you.
Not you, Caleb. Whoever asked the question.
Yep, I think that's good. Eden, you didn't see any others, did you? That's the one that stood out to me. Otherwise, I think we're good to.
No, I think we're going to move on.
Thanks. So
Game on. Okay, amazing. Well, let me go back to the beginning of the 3 parts of a killer resume. There are really 3 key elements of every great resume. And if any of you have been to our resume makeover sessions, the Ultimate Consulting Resume Makeover sessions, this is basically what I do in 20 minutes or less. And we do it verbally. This is the same thing that we do in our editing process through Black Belt or in our standard edits. We first look at your format. Does it look like an adult presentation of a resume. Is it the right size, shape? Is the formatting consistent? And we fix it if it's not, because a resume that looks like a professional resume generally is received like a professional resume. That doesn't take a ton of time. And a lot of you get that right by using templates. Some of you come in from your universities with pre-guidance on that. So formatting is not where we spend the majority of our time. We put a lot of consideration into what structure your resume should have, how much each of the pieces of your resume should be allocated and what should be focused on. And so I'll talk about that in just a second. But the place that we spend more than 50% of our time is on the content, on every individual bullet. Because if we can't understand what the bullets are saying, then they're wasting space on the resume. So our job is to either cut bullets, which we do relentlessly, or to reword them in a way that actually tells what you're trying to say. And we find that a lot of people are accustomed to using what they feel like is insider language, and really it's just non-specific jargon. So I'll talk through the three of those things. The sum of all of them is basically coming in. It's not saying, well, you will be the best staff member. This is a really important distinction, because for a lot of roles in a lot of places, they hire one person, and your job is to say, I am the best. Inside consulting firms, they hire teams, they hire cohorts, they hire new groups of people that come through the process. And so while you will be the best is not what you're trying to communicate. While you will be a great fit, a great staff member is what you're trying to communicate. Cohesive formatting is essential. So the number one thing we look at if formatting is not the right formatting, but consistent formatting. We want it to be exactly the same throughout the whole document. I'm not going to give you the responsibility to fix a problem for a $150 billion company if you can't figure out the formatting on your own resume, right? So this is a detail-oriented nature of the resume that is a really helpful part of the process. A few guidance points, because people ask us: 0.5 inches at a minimum for the margins, a font size of up to 11.5, 11 or 10 are our two most common fonts that we use, but you cannot go below 10. Y'all, there are old people reading these resumes. You have to be nice to them. And you cannot go above 11.5 because it looks like there's not a lot going on your resume. Every resume for spacing should be single spaced. There should be at least a half a line. So if you have 10-point font, there should be a 5-point space in between each industry, in between each entry, and never, ever, ever paste lines on your document. You should always use the box underline function after titles. Otherwise, you're going to have inconsistent lines when it's printed out. It's very obvious. In general, if you send us something in a table, we don't like them. They're hard to negotiate. They're hard to update. They can really create funky challenges. So we move almost everything out of tables and into the use of tabs. You can use left tab for left justified and right tab for right justified in the same line. And the two of those together create this really great white space in each one of your entries. Color on your resume should be black and white. I mean, I think we're over this whole hurdle, but about 5 years ago, we went through this process where people were like, you know what everybody needs is a graphic resume. They want a picture of my story. And I was like, no, they don't. They do not want a picture, because your desire to demonstrate how you don't conform is going to just represent double the work for them. So really just tell your story in a clear and crisp way. And your focus, I just want to emphasize, is not standing out in your resume. Your focus is, I am qualified and highly so. Your focus on standing out is in the off resume pieces of what you do. And I'm going to talk about this in the final section again. Finally, for fonts, generally, if you use a sans serif font, you have to stick to a pretty traditional one. Our strong preference is for serif fonts. I like the kind of grave, somber look of the serif fonts. And so in general, we will try to move to that unless you are guided otherwise. I already put this up here, but just to talk through it, the structure of a winning resume, we look at your heading, we make sure that the right information is there. We're kind of moved away now from where you live in proximity, but your phone number and your email address are important to put on there. If you live where you are applying, I do generally recommend that you put the city and state where you're also living, because a local hire will have preference over somebody that they have to bring in from outside of the area. The overview, as we already mentioned, I think of as kind of superfluous. Publications and presentations for my APDs on the call, I generally will put into a very consolidated section on the main resume and or a second page that is like an appendix where you put your publications and presentations. So it satisfies your very academic qualifications and needs for a standard resume, but it's not clouding the core presentation. And then really the breakdown we look for is around 25% education. A lot of people just have like a line that has your GPA on it, but we're like, hey, what are your test scores? What are some leadership activities? Did you get any scholarships or award? We usually find ourselves bulking up the education experience. Why? We're looking for great students. We're looking for people who loved school, were involved in school, demonstrate another dimension of who you are through school. Experience will and should always be the most important thing. What have you done, applied on the job that usually demonstrates both what you would like to do and what you're skilled to do. And then extracurricular leadership from outside the workforce in the classroom that can be in your community, can be on campuses, is usually around 20%. When we do strategy sprints, we just finished one last week. When we do strategy sprints at Management Consulted, it depends on the person where they put the work. Because for consulting resumes, what you are generally never doing is telling somebody, here's how much I earned at my former job. They're going to tell you, we're going to hire you at this position, we're going to pay you this much. It's pay transparency to the max. But because of that, they're not looking for you to explain only paid roles in the experience section. They're looking for you to explain relevant work experiences in the experience section. They're also looking for you to explain other experiences in the leadership section. So for some people, their best work experience is a strategy sprint that they do here. They build a model, they define a product, they identify a slide that they're going to present. So thinking through all of that, I think is really, really valuable for not wasting your own time. And then finally, by the way, the last section, a lot of people skip over this personal category. Like, we want this, y'all. We want you to demonstrate that you're an interesting, fascinating person that we want to talk to. We are not hiring robots. We want people. So are you interested in chocolate tasting in Switzerland? Do you like, herding sheep for vacation? Are you like, I don't know what you like. All of these, by the way, are things that I like, but who are you? We want to see some color around that. And you can also put a number of your analytical skills, some languages that you speak, any kind of buffer things that didn't merit an entire entry. We use this section to kind of catch other things that you might want to talk about on your resume, but you don't want to dedicate an entire entry to. So the personal section we think of as much more important usually than you do. And the final piece is content. I mentioned we spend about 50% of our time talking through content, but for content, there are really three key pieces. Content first starts with the context. Who are you working for? How big is your team? What is the name of the team inside the organization that you worked for? What is the purpose of that organization? We look for one unique action word per line. Our goal is generally no repeats on a resume. If we repeat something, we repeat it a max of twice. We're generally looking for some kind of results. What happened as a result of what you did? And we're looking for a number in every line. And I just want to say that a lot of you don't know how to tell these stories in writing, but you're actually pretty good when we prompt you at telling them in conversation. You can do it for an interview. This is the same structure that we use to build what we call our hero stories, our 1-minute stories from your experience. What is the context? What is the action? What are the results? And so that's something that our coaches will often work on with people as a part of the resume writing process, is that they're like, great, what are your 5 best stories? People will tell them their 5 best stories. They go back to their resume. They're completely missing. They were nowhere on there. And so they're like, awesome. Okay, we need to retell what is on your resume and your document in line with these amazing stories that you have about your background. So this is what we spend our time doing. If you don't put a number in a line, we ask you to put it in or we cancel the line. It's gone. Not putting a number on a line is basically an invitation to not read it. And so why would you put stuff on your resume that you want people not to read? Not putting context there helps often, context helps to magnify the work that you've done into its rightful place. And so a lot of people also don't put the appropriate amount of context there. And then finally, you have to kind of keep in mind the elements of each of the sections that matter to consultants. Eden, if you're able to pop the fit score into the chat, many of you probably have already done this quiz, but if you haven't, you might find this incredibly illuminating. We have a fit score quiz that will help you figure out, like, is your education what it needs to be? Is your experience what it needs to be? Is your leadership what it needs to be? And so just as a quick note to that, for education, we're looking at pedigree. We're looking at whether you have a quantitative skill demonstrated. Like if you're an engineer, I'm assuming you can handle the quant. If you're a PhD physicist, I'm assuming you can handle the quant. If you are an English major, I'm not sure. So I probably would want to see some augmentation of coursework that you've done, maybe an extracurricular project, maybe a case competition that you were a part of. I'm also looking at whether you were a good student. If you're a good student, I'm likely to think that you have the work ethic and the savvy to be good at this job too. By the way, I don't need a 4.0. I just need like not a 3.0. I need something in between. I don't need perfection. I'm not looking for like best student, best person. I'm just like above a certain place. Really makes sense. For experience, I am looking for brand name experience. If you come to me from Google and Goldman, it's going to be easier than if you come from 2 startups. If you don't have that experience, you need to augment the other pieces of this. What analytics did you do? How did you affect someone's business with the work that you did? And what was the distinction that you found as you were working through it? So did you get promoted? Did you get an offer to return? These are the kinds of things that you message. Consulting firms are not insecure. They're not like, oh, they got an offer to return there. I bet we shouldn't even interview them. That's not how they think. They're exactly the opposite. They're like, oh, they got an offer to return there. We should interview them double. Right. So think about the way that you portray your experiences. Many of you do better work than you give yourself credit for in the resume. And then for leadership, tell about the people that you worked with or teams that you led, the budgets that you impacted, and then what you actually accomplished. We are only, however, looking for professional leadership experiences unless you are a varsity athlete at a school. So if you're a varsity athlete at a college or beyond, then we are looking for that experience. Otherwise, it's really just your professional work. The fit scores can really help you figure out where you stand. So Caleb and Eden, I'll come to you again. I promise I'll be nice about the questions, even Caleb. But are there any things that you would like to read up before I wrap this by just talking about taking your resume from kill to killer?
Let's see here.
I don't think I've ever seen this many like mentions in the chat, by the way. Y'all are just flying. Well done.
One question that has come up a little bit, and it's more the broader recruitment question, is in terms of that deadline, can you just confirm, folks are asking, do you want to apply as soon as possible or wait till the end of that deadline?
Good. Yeah. Let me clarify. Let me come back to this deadline page. You want to apply like day of or day before, but not after. So you do not have to apply. They do not look at the resumes on a rolling basis. So you don't have to apply tomorrow. There is no urgency for that. There is urgency to apply before the first deadline, because at that point they batch everybody together and do this professional resume review. And so there is no advantage to applying 2 weeks or 4 weeks early, but there is advantage in applying at the first deadline versus the second deadline, because those two are batched. They're batched separately, and your rates of acceptance go down in the second batch. Absolutely, every single time.
That's
Hope that was that what people were looking for, Caleb?
Yes, super helpful.
Yeah, I think I made that about as clear as mud earlier.
And one other question just I saw him too is regarding like publications, maybe for those publications, how would those fit in, like research, authored papers, etc.?
Yeah, so if you were a first author on a paper, generally we would accommodate for some space on the first page of your resume for these APD applications. So if it's a recent thing and you're applying as an APD, the firms will know how and where to put that. But generally putting it on a second page of a resume as kind of, I consider it like a publication or presentation appendix. We would usually think of that as well. So we would put your first author papers in a, highlighted, or we put your name bolded in those. We've done a ton of these over the years, but generally for consulting, we're not looking for the like long, exorbitant academic resume, because what happens is that people pad their resume with these presentations. They don't tell the rest of the story. We're not looking for PhDs that just have a lot of presentations. We're looking for PhDs who also did really interesting commercial work, and PhDs who maybe taught in the classroom, and PhDs who did some really interesting analytics in their lab. Like, we're looking for the well-rounded PhDs, not the PhDs with the most presentations. So I think there's often, again, like we just have to recalibrate the parts of your story that make the most sense to tell.
That's great.
By the way, if any of you want to share your resume with us, we will tell you not whether it is good or bad. We will tell you if we think we need to edit it or not. So just to be clear, we don't do like free resume reviews. I mean, we would have 100,000 of them a day if we did that. It would be very generous of us, but it's not something that we do regularly. But if you're like, I don't know if this needs an edit or not, and I'm not sure whether I would want to buy something from you because I think it might be fine, send it to us. We'll tell you, and we will absolutely tell you if it's fine, because we thrive on our broader community's success in the industry, not on each individual sale. So just so that you know, we take a very long view of helping people, and we love to be helpful. So that would be helpful for you. I just want to acknowledge that we're happy to do that. 3 resume myths that are busted. And by the way, Japheth, I think, is going to do those. But Eden, if you want to put Japheth's direct email, or you can just put the team email in the chat for those resume reviews, that'd be great. I want to bust a few final myths, because I think that we need y'all to understand that, like, when you come to us, we don't give you a vanilla response. We're not like, oh, you should do this, pop it in this template, use this AI format. We're like, who are you and how can we help you? We're very custom. We're very passionate about helping you succeed. And the messages that we get from people who break into the industry are just like, they're tear jerking. They're beautiful, because we start with helping you figure out who you are and where you fit and how to get there. And so the resume myths are really related to that. Like, we cannot tell you, do these 5 things and your resume will be perfect, because everybody's story is a little different. But we can help you bust some myths. So number 1, you do not need a tailored resume for each firm. You need one best practice resume. And if you have a great resume that you know is great, you do not need to go anywhere else. Over the 15 years that I've worked with Management Consulted, I have not experienced a client who got their resume edited here and went somewhere else. But we have a lot of people who get their resumes edited somewhere else and come here. Okay. And that's because this is the final resume that they need. This is their one best practice resume. The second is add in as much detail as possible. There's a lot of like, maybe the kitchen sink will be helpful here. No, a clear storyline, unmuddied by tangents, unmuddied by the, like, they might also be interested in this, or told in a way where the tangents fit into the appropriate place on the resume is critical. Because like my story would sound like a total maniac if I didn't tell it in a clear line. I have 10 versions of my story I could tell. I have to tell it in a very clear arc in order to have somebody understand it. And then the third myth is use formatting to stand out, like put color on, do a different format. No, keep it basic and professional. Your job is to stand out on merit and on everything outside of this. Don't send your resume in for help. Okay, so again, like what I did could have been a fatal error. Thankfully, my resume wasn't terrible, but don't send your resume in and say like, hey, can you help me with this? You do not send a resume to your first networking email. You send it only 5 minutes before an informational interview. So somebody has to have agreed to get on the phone with you and be 5 minutes away from actually showing up before you send them your resume. Everything else that you tell in your story has to be told in email or a LinkedIn message or by chat. Third, after you confirm that you have a referral with the firm, after you've talked to them, told your story, gotten them enthusiastic about you, then you send your resume and say, this is the resume I'm planning to share. Do you have any tweaks that you'd recommend for me to make? But in general, your goal is to have them come back and say no. And then my last slide for today is when in doubt, speak it out. This kind of is related to how we do bullet building on the resume. And by the way, our process is not arduous. It's like very streamlined. It's very quick. We don't even need to talk to you most of the time because we can figure out how great you are and what you need to do. And we have 2 rounds of edits in which to do it. But a lot of you can tell a better story than you can write a better story. So we have people go through the process of telling this is what I would walk through in the first 2 minutes of my resume, and they'll grab time with a coach to do this. And in the process, they'll realize, oh my gosh, the story I thought I needed to tell is not the story I need to tell. They'll tell that story. They figure it out. They start with their personal roots. They talk through education, 2 to 4 experiences in leadership. For each one, here's briefly what happened and why, and then what's next. And then they figure out what made it into the 2 minutes and what didn't. And that helps to crystallize the arc of your story. So when in doubt, talk through a bullet point and explain it as if you're in an interview. And then go back and talk through the whole, walk me through your resume. And see what makes it and see what doesn't. And then edit your resume accordingly. Make sure that the resume itself doesn't just help you get in the door, but helps you actually close the deal by getting the job. I can stick around for just a few minutes if we've got questions. Gosh, we have like hundreds of messages in the chat. So Eden and Caleb, any questions that you think we should address before jumping out today?
So I have one that's been coming up a lot, and it actually brings up a good question. We should probably put out an article specifically about this.
Great.
And it's, how do I ask for a referral outright in a 15-minute coffee chat?
Okay, I love it. Great. So that's like a totally different topic, except it really is the same topic as I mentioned before, because your resume is meant to be the tool riding on the back of these amazing dynamic conversations that you have with people in networking. You ask at the end of the chat in this following way with this specific language. You say, after spending a little bit of time with me today, would you feel comfortable referring me for the role? It's a very consulting-ish, like ask adjacent way to ask, because you're not asking, will you refer me? You ask, will you feel comfortable referring me? And what that does is it opens the door to very genuine input and feedback. So if I felt like I needed more time with you, I would say that. I will tell you, almost nobody will say, I want to get on the phone with you again before I see. What they will say is, yes, I would love to refer you, or no, I can't, and here's why. And both of those responses are incredibly valuable, but I just want to highlight, it's actually also very kind to the person that you're talking to, because they did not sign up to become your lifelong mentor in this first 15-minute conversation. So if you can go, they knew in 2 minutes whether they were going to refer you or not. They really did. So just ask the question, get it done, get the feedback or get the referral, and then you can move on. But that's how you can do it in a way that doesn't feel transactional. It's very kind to them because it acknowledges that in 15 minutes, y'all got done what needed to be done. And it's also really open so that you're able to get that great insight if you need it. Any others? Caleb, you have any others?
Let's see. Yeah, there's a ton in here. I would say there's
Go,
here's
Caleb,
one.
go.
Here's one from Art. If we interned at the same firm during 2 summers and worked somewhere else in between, do I list the 2 summers separately, even if it's the same firm?
Yeah, that's great. That's a judgment call that I can't make. That's like one of those things where I can't say this is the rule for this, because it would depend a lot on the balance of your story. So if your story is you have 3 total experiences, yeah, I might separate them out. If your story is you have 5 experiences, I probably would try on purpose to consolidate those. And I would highlight the fact that you got a request to return, which is one of those hallmarks of success that I was talking about earlier. So that would be a judgment call that our editing team would make with you in light of the broader story. No clear and fast rule for that, yes or no.
And Jeremy, I just have one more comment too, just to on the coffee chat. So that's something that we do teach and empowering inside the community. We've got several master classes on how to turn cold consultants you don't know into scheduled coffee chats and how to turn those into actual referrals. We have 2 one-hour masterclass trainings. It's something we actually consult with you one-on-one with and help you inside the community. And I've even led role-playing events. We actually role-play the coffee chat and how to set the agenda, ask the right questions, and ask for the referral. So if that's an issue for you, then you'll get that kind of support one-on-one inside the community as you join a black belt.
Bingo. Yeah, Caleb doesn't let you guys get away with nonsense, right? Like you get stuck, he gets you unstuck.
Yep.
So yeah, the community is a really special place. I think people have found it very inspiring because it's very, I just want to acknowledge it's very natural to get discouraged in this process, in this market, also in this timeline. Like there are firms right now that are pushing back people who got an offer at this time last year, their start dates until the beginning of next year. That's a really long ramp window. There's a lot of factors at play in the market and firms are just not sure, but some of them are hiring today. In fact, Caleb, can I whisper about it? About what's happening inside the community. Okay, so on Monday, we're releasing a job board inside the community. We will probably at some point make it available at large. But we looked at it yesterday, there are 1,297 jobs that are like high six-figure jobs that we are like, yes, you should do these at both consulting firms and corporate strategy roles that are the kinds of jobs that y'all are looking for. We honestly built it in part to answer the question for ourselves, is anybody actually hiring? Because we have all these amazing firms come on and they're like, yes, we're hiring. Julian says, we're hiring at Bates White, guys, we're hiring. Like, we want you, please submit your resumes. And at the same time, you feel like there's no opportunity. So we're trying to bridge that gap. But inside the community, that's one of the other things. When people get discouraged about, I can't find great opportunities, now we've created solutions for that as well. Eden, Caleb, final.
Yeah,
Josh.
I just want to say one thing that I know Jenny Ray mentioned this, but our black belt is the next cohort launches on Wednesday next week. And so if y'all are wanting to ask any questions or just discuss your profile and say, is now the right time for me to be jumping in and to discuss prep, I'd love to help. You can jump on my calendar. I've dropped it in the chat multiple times. And one of the things that folks, I think there's some misconceptions out there about black belt and like, oh, well, the timing doesn't always make sense. So I just want to dispel a myth here that like, the main part of the cohort is these live group sessions that Caleb is hosting with the firms that are happening in real time that you want to be in person. But 90% of black belt happens on your own through self-paced curriculum, through the coaching, through one-on-one time with Caleb, all these things. So we want you to dive in. We want you to know that like, no matter when you're recruiting, whether that be in the summer or in the fall, now is a great time for you to be prepping because it's a muscle you have to build and a skill you have to build over time.
Some people are super users, and Eden, you're totally right. I didn't even say June 5th. It's next Wednesday, June 5th. It's our most popular cohort of the year. The June cohort is always the one that sells out the earliest. So please don't wait until next Tuesday night because there probably will not be spots available for the June cohort when it comes close to the time. But yeah, like, black belt is very much self-catered to who and what you are. But there are super users who are like, I want to come to everything, but we record 100% of it if you can't come. And so if you are in an odd time zone, if you're busy working, if you're in another summer internship, like go do those things. We love you for them. Our top performers are doing many different things. We don't require anything from you for black belt. We just offer you a lot. And there's a huge difference between the two of those. Thanks, Eden, for that clarification. And I'm super glad you said it because I literally was like, join black belt, but I didn't say anything about the deadline, which is one of the reasons why we did the call today and not last week and not next week, is so that y'all know about that deadline because it's such an important one and it usually does fill up in advance. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We're so honored that you'd spend your time today with us. We are thrilled to be able to help. We hope that you send your resumes in. We'd love to see you inside Black Belt. We hope that your resume story was changed by some of the stuff that we shared today. We hope that this was interesting and insightful. And if you ever have great ideas for future sessions, we're always all ears. What you ask about is what we want to be talking about. So we're so grateful for your time, your input, and your trust in us. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.